Yeah. Analytics off the chain, other channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is up, beautiful souls of Headliner Nation? It's your boy Kyle back with our waiver wire show for what is now week 9 of the NFL season. Whew, over halfway. We're getting there, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully your season is going well. We've got 4 teams on a bye this week. Not quite the bye-apocalypse that we saw a couple of weeks ago, but still going to be missing some big-time names that you may need to have in your lineups this week. And if you got to get the waiver wire rolling to make sure you fill those spots, then you are in the right place to find yourself some fill-ins. But before we start jumping into everything, got to remember, first off, our waiver wire show is brought to you by our friends over at Fantrax, one of the most customizable fantasy sports platforms in the industry today. So make sure that you go check them out. And then we also need to do our They Said What segment of the week, taking a look back at some of the best comments from this past week. So let's go ahead and hop into those first. Coming up, number 1, Andrew Prasad. I like this. Real Deal Khalil. I like that. Now, Khalil Herbert didn't end up having a top 10 performance. Yes, he ended up playing okay. Not as good as we've seen the last couple of weeks. Some very strong runs, though. But Real Deal Khalil. I like that, Andrew. I might end up using that if you don't mind. Just sign off on that for me in the comments down below. Number 2, the A-Train. Lots of people were saying the same thing this week. Let's go. I get my Chubb back. Lots of people were getting their Chubb back this week. It made lots of significant others very, very happy. And fantasy rosters too, but good to see Nick Chubb back in the lineup. Scott Urich left a love the hair, guys. If you saw the episode, our live show on Saturday night, we did our annual Halloween episode. Jake and I were rocking some decent haircuts. Scott appreciated the hair, and Scott, we appreciate the comment. And then finally from Joseph Dominguez, is probably the only Jags fan in the community. I'm willing to lick Kyle's calves for that Chenault jersey. Joseph, listen, I'm not saying no to that request, but I don't have the jersey. Jake has it, and it's going to be kind of up to him. I also don't know if I want to meet somebody in person that is willing to lick my calves for a jersey. But I kind of am too. I don't know. A lot of different feels in this comment here, Joseph, but appreciate you letting me know what you'd be willing to do for a signed jersey. I've done a whole lot less for a whole lot more. All right, or a whole lot more for a whole lot less. I messed that up. My bad. Okay, now we got to hop into it, though. Let's go ahead and bring up our running backs and talk about which running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends that we could add this week. And then we'll talk about our waiver. We'll talk about streaming options and then some players to drop as well. All right, diving into the running back position, we got to address the elephant in the room. Breaking news this morning. Apparently, Derrick Henry could be done for the season, which is a huge, huge blow to Tennessee, fantasy owners, and just football in general, because the dude was absolutely having a great season again. Jeremy McNichols is my guy from Tennessee. That's who I'm going to be grabbing right now. He's next up. That's all there is to it. He's next up. Now, I would not be surprised if Tennessee goes and trades for a running back. Who is that going to be? Could it be Ronald Jones? It just depends. Ronald Jones is the name that kind of comes to mind first. Marlon Mack would have been out there, but they just cut Jordan Wilkins, so I'd be surprised if they were to trade Marlon Mack. There's maybe a few more names out there that could potentially be available. But, with all that being said, I think they end up trading for someone. But for right now, Jeremy McNichols is probably going to be the number 1 guy added this week. He's going to have to be, especially for owners. And the good thing about McNichols is, he's not going to help you out on the ground a whole lot. But there's been a couple of times this season where we've seen him get a lot of targets in the passing game when guys have been hurt. A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, when they were out a couple of weeks ago, McNichols saw some targets in the passing game. So keep an eye on him. He's probably going to be one of the first guys added. But I would not be surprised if Tennessee goes out and adds a running back via trade of some kind. And because of that, don't spend a whole lot on Jeremy McNichols. Just don't do it, because he could be irrelevant again in a couple of weeks. For Philadelphia, Boston Scott, Jordan Howard, both of these guys ended up being the main guys last week. Now, in the waiver wire show, I did talk about Kenneth Gainwell last week as being a priority ad. He didn't end up doing anything, but as we went through the week, when people are asking us, do I start Kenneth Gainwell, we were saying no more times than not because we did not like this matchup for him. Honestly, he's going to be a pass catching back. He's not going to be a workhorse. We said it all along. We said it in the live show. Boston Scott's probably going to see a lot of the touches on the ground, and it's Detroit. So don't be surprised if positive game script leads to some Jordan Howard this week too, and a lot of Boston Scott. But now we're going up against the LA Chargers, which is going to lead to more Kenneth Gainwell. He's over 50% owned, so he's not included in this video, but I'm not giving up on him yet. For Jordan Howard, I'm not adding him. I've got him listed here just in case because of how low he's owned. If you're in deeper leagues, 16-team leagues, whatever it may be, you could potentially grab him. It's going to be Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell this week for me, though. Boston Scott doesn't have the upside that he had this past week. I do think we end up seeing more Kenneth Gainwell in a matchup where they're probably going to have to be throwing a lot more, and Hurts just obviously hasn't looked good this season. So a lot of dump-offs, high percentages, passes could end up going to Kenneth Gainwell. So both of them, about Boston Scott at 4.5% owned. Yes, Adam, just be careful for this week. But moving forward in better matchups until Miles Sanders comes back, Scott could be a lot more usable. Ryan Nall for Chicago. Khalil Herbert had to end up leaving the game. He wasn't gone for very long. He ended up coming back, which was great. But Williams was ruled out at one point. I mean, he went off the field very early, came back in street clothes, so he might be done for a while again. If he's done for a while, Monty's not quite back yet. Ryan Nall is going to be the backup if anything does happen to Herbert. He kind of got bent backwards a little bit. If for some reason something pops up this week and he ends up feeling worse than what he did during the game, ends up stiffening up, needs to get through it the week. Ryan Nall could be a guy coming up against Pittsburgh. If for some reason Herbert can't go or is limited against Pittsburgh, Ryan Nall's the guy just to keep on the radar if you own Herbert. Carlos Hyde for Jacksonville. They're going to have an absolutely garbage matchup against Buffalo this week, but Hyde saw 8 targets in the passing game. So, I mean, you could end up doing a lot worse. He's not going to do a whole lot on the ground for you against Buffalo, but in the passing game, if he sees 8 targets again, he could end up being a flex option. I'd be looking for other things, but Carlos Hyde could end up being a decent play this week. Rex Burkhead for New England, or not New England, for Houston. I mean, he was in New England for so long. Rex Burkhead for Houston. Wait, where did Burkhead come from? Because listen, I mean, they traded Mark Ingram, so it was like, all right, David Johnson, next man up. No, tricky there, Houston. They ended up going with Rex Burkhead. I mean, he scored a touchdown. He was used on the ground. He was used through the air. And again, it was a matchup in which they were down the entire time, but is he going to be the lead back going forward? Is it going to be David Johnson? Is it going to I don't know, but Rex Burkhead right now, I don't think a whole lot of people are going to be jumping on him, so you could probably add him. You have to use a whole lot of fab or, a high waiver priority to get him. Rashad Penny for Seattle. They're going to be in the bye this week, but I just want to keep him on here. Alex Collins is still with the lead back, but he's been banged up. Chris Carson may be done for the season. So if anything happens to Collins, Rashad Penny's going to end up being the guy. And if that happens, we're going to be trying to add him a little bit more quickly. And then Mark Ingram for New Orleans. They tried to get him moving a little bit this past week, but again, it was a tough matchup against Tampa Bay. But now they're going to get Atlanta next week. Mark Ingram, for me, in a positive game script, could end up being a flex play this week. I don't hate this at all. If you need a running back to get through the week and you don't own Mark Ingram, I would grab him for this week. I think you could put him in your lineup, get some decent numbers. It's going to be positive game script. He's going to be utilized a little bit more. Yeah, I think they try to dial Alvin Kamara back just a little bit so he doesn't get too banged up for the playoff run. I mean, they had the big win over Tampa Bay, so they're clearly in the playoff picture, playing very well. And then also, with the quarterback situation with Jameis Winston, is it going to be Trevor Siemian? I think Taysom Hill is going to be back this week, but with Mark Ingram, could end up seeing a lot of touches on the ground if they really focus on using the running back a lot more. Moving on to the wide receivers. Just my weekly reminder that Christian Kirk and AJ Green both are under 40% owned. Nothing really to add about these guys. I mean, they're not going to kill a week for you, but they might not win a week. But if you need somebody, toss them out there because we know Arizona is going to throw the football around, right? Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Green Bay, 10% owned. He was close to playing last week. Very close to playing last week. Now they're going to be back against Kansas City, a team who does give up some big plays, and a team that they're going to have to throw against. So if MVS is back this week, that's going to bode really, really well for the matchup, really well for Aaron Rodgers, and for fantasy owners alike. Now for the Atlanta Falcons situation, for Calvin Ridley stepping away. Russell Gage and Taji Sharp, those are going to be the guys. Gage and Sharp are going to be the main guys I'm going to be looking at. Now, obviously, everybody's going to be probably looking at Gage first. We've seen it from him before, right? We've seen him produce in this offense. But he's never been the main guy. He's had Julio. He's had guys there before. Now, the main guy is going to be Kyle Pitts now. So 2 weeks ago, Russell Gage, back from injury, 6 targets, 4 receptions, 67 yards, a touchdown, and then he turns around last week and down the crapper. So my kind of pivot, for those of you that are later in the waiver order that might not get Russell Gage, it's Sharp for me, 0.1% owned. And when Ridley hasn't played this season, Sharp's snap percentage has been above 80%, and he's also gone over 50 yards both times. So Russell Gage may or may not see cornerback 1 coverage, because if you put Kyle Pitts in the slot, you're not necessarily going to get the cornerback 1 coverage all the time because they might not move to the slot. So then if Russell Gage isn't in the slot, then he's going to be out wide, probably going to see, and then Sharp's going to see cornerback 2 or 3 coverage. He's an option to look at, people. He's not going to win you any weeks, but I also think you could throw him in your lineup and get 6-7 points, maybe. I mean, not a whole lot. If he scores a touchdown, that's great. Maybe he gets you around 12 then. But he's a guy to take a look at because he's going to be cheap. I think he's going to be overlooked, and I think he's going to be a guy that is going to have decent output on this team. Let's just say that. I mean, if Calvin Ridley wasn't producing and Kyle Pitts is up and down, I'm not saying Sharp is going to light the world on fire, but he's a pivot that I'm taking a look at instead of going towards Russell Gage. Brandon Ayuk has dropped under 50% owned, but he got 7 targets last week. Is he finally starting to get more looks in the passing game? We've seen this season. It looks like Brandon Ayuk is ready to go, and all of a sudden next week, boom, crashing back down to earth. Darnell Mooney, kind of the same thing. Under 50% owned now. But does this game plan that we saw last week continue? I mean, the game plan for the Chicago Bears this past week was excellent. They utilized the best parts of Kyle Fields' game. They put him to really help with his strengths, and Darnell Mooney is the connection right now. You can see that Justin Fields trusts Darnell Mooney. But is Matt Nagy going to come back this week and absolutely wreck everything? You know, Matt Nagy is like the non-fun parent, right? Like, he's on you all the time, like, do this, do that, like, not having any fun. And then parent has to go away for a week to a conference. And now fun parent is left. And it's like, we're having ice cream. We're having snacks. Movie night every night. We're camping out in the living room. Okay, see, that's what Matt Nagy is. Matt Nagy, the non-fun parent, was gone this week. And look what Chicago did. They didn't win, but they played a lot better. And the game plan was awesome. Now Matt Nagy is going to come back, and now we have to go back to eating kale every night for dinner and being in bed by 7 and doing our homework right when we get home from work or school. Nico Collins for Houston at 1.5% owned. When Taylor gets back, Nico Collins is going to be a good option, I think. I mean, he has 15 targets over the last 3 weeks since coming back, and that's with David Mills. Ty Taylor is getting closer and closer to returning. I really like Nico Collins moving forward. Jamison Crowder from the New York Jets at only 18% owned. The short passing game was the attack last week. I mean, dumping off to Michael Carter, dumping off to Jamison Crowder. Ty Johnson got involved. That's what they did with Mike White last week. They really set him up to succeed, high percentage passes, and then they let the players do the work after the catch. If they continue to do that with White, depending on how long Zach Wilson is out, Jamison Crowder is going to be a guy that is going to be the number 1 wide receiver on that team, more than likely, even with Corey Davis coming back. Maybe this week. I don't know. I haven't heard much on him. I'm going to finally include Jamal Agnew on this list here, and I don't know why we need to, because Urban Meyer, again, absolute moron. But he's got 25 targets the last 3 weeks for some reason. You've got Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault, and you're giving Jamal Agnew, a career special teams guy who couldn't even play wide receiver with the Detroit Lions. You're trying to get him. I mean, he's not doing a whole lot. Like, he's not setting the world on fire by any means, but he's getting targets. And when you got a lot of teams on bye, sometimes you just got to get some targets in your lineup. Rashad Bateman for Baltimore, they're coming off the bye, so a lot of people may have just kind of forgot about Rashad Bateman, but not even 20% owned. Kind of a good stash for you right now, especially going up against Minnesota. I mean, Minnesota got absolutely torched by Cooper Rush, so we'll see what Lamar Jackson and these wide receivers can do this week against Minnesota. Moving on to tight ends. Got a few tight ends to talk about this week. First up, Mercedes Lewis for Green Bay. Robert Tonyan missing the rest of the season. Looks like an ACL tear if I remember correctly. Lewis is kind of an emergency stash, but also they actively tried to get Mercedes Lewis going. I mean, there was a couple of times this year where he saw like 80% of the snaps at the tight end position. So, I mean, if Robert Tonyan wasn't doing a whole lot, I don't think Mercedes Lewis is going to do a whole lot either, but he doesn't really have another tight end to compete with him now either. Hayden Hurst for Atlanta. I mentioned this when I dropped my Calvin Ridley breaking news video yesterday. We have to see what happens with the Ridley fallout. But one thing that I mentioned that could potentially happen is now you see Cordero Patterson move from, running back maybe out to wide receiver more often, which means Mike Davis is going to play running back more often. You could also see, Kyle Pitts has not played on the line much this year, if at all, barely. Most of his snaps have come in the slot or out wide, which means now we can put Hayden Hurst on the end of the line. That's one. Hayden Hurst at this point could become a fantasy viable tight end very, very quickly, especially if for some reason Matt Ryan starts to look his way more often. Kyle Pitts is the number one. Russell Gage is covered by a cornerback one. That's not going to be a great matchup. I talked about Sharp a minute ago, but Hayden Hurst being kind of a dump-off guy, getting the majority of the looks, from the quick passing game. I like that for Hayden Hurst. Now, I'm not necessarily running to add him like crazy, but I might list him as a start this week. But we're going to have to kind of wait and see how things happen. If you have room, he may be one of the better tight ends to add off this list. Cole Kmet from Chicago, 14% owned. Stop sucking me in, Cole. Come on. Now, again, back to the Matt Nagy situation. Non-fun parent was not there last week. The non-fun parent is going to come back, and maybe it ruins Cole Kmet. But he was absolutely used in the passing game. You could see that it was a part of the game plan, getting the ball to the tight ends. Absolutely love that for Cole Kmet moving forward. Pat Freiermuth at 6.2% owned. I've been telling you for a couple of weeks now, since Juju's been out, Pat Fryer, the Muth, is going to be a guy that we're keeping our eye on. Now, I haven't had him listed as a start too often. I think I've listed him as a start once in the last 3 weeks. But now we got to go. Now we got to go with it. He's looking more and more comfortable every single week. 7 for 44 and 1 last week, 7 targets, 4 receptions. He's getting more and more involved. I've been telling you for a couple of weeks now that we need to add this guy. Now it's time to add him and start him. Brevin Jordan for Houston. He's been hurt all year, but he's an insanely talented rookie. Maybe a whole lot of you haven't really kept up on it. I know myself, I talked about Brevin Jordan this offseason. I know Chris Chouse over on Headliner U talked about Brevin Jordan this offseason. I think Chris Chouse and I did an episode together where we talked about Brevin Jordan too, if I remember. But he looks like he might be the guy. He's back. He's healthy now. He might be the guy moving forward at the tight end position. Saw 4 targets, caught 3 of those for 41 yards and a touchdown. Dan Arnold's got 23 targets over the last 3 games, like I've mentioned. This week going up against Buffalo, it's not a good matchup, so I'm not interested in him this week. But after that, back to probably using him. Foster Moreau from the Las Vegas Raiders. I haven't heard anything on Darren Waller at this point. They're coming out of the bye and heading into the bye. Basically, it was he's day-to-day. He's going to be around the facility this week. He's going to be getting treatment. I don't know what that means. They haven't said anything else. But if you own Darren Waller, Foster Moreau is going to be a guy that you're going to have to keep an eye on. And then Tyler Conklin from Minnesota. Not a huge game last night, but had a huge 31-yard catch. Definitely looked like they were trying to get him more involved, which I've been begging the Vikings to get Tyler Conklin, Kyle Rudolph, Irv Smith Jr. I mean, all these guys more involved in the game plan. Obviously, with Smith being hurt, Kyle Rudolph being gone, Tyler Conklin's one of the main guys now. They've got Chris Herndon, but they could have a really, really good tight end weapon if they would just utilize him more, especially with the other weapons that they have around him there. All right, let's talk a little streaming options now. The first position for streaming is going to be the quarterback position. Tua going to be my first name up here against Miami. Going up against Houston. Definitely one of the easiest matchups for the streaming quarterback options this week. Didn't have a great week last week, but the 2 weeks prior to that, over 600 combined yards, throwing the ball around. I think 4 touchdowns, or it was a 3 or 4 touchdowns. It was 4 touchdowns combined those 2 weeks. Tua was looking really, really good, kind of unleashing things a little bit. Like, we saw when he was fully healthy at Alabama. Wasn't, maybe fully healthy all season last year, still working his way back. Ends up getting hurt this year, comes back, and then they fully unleashed him. Buffalo this past week was a really tough matchup, but getting Houston, come on. I think you can stream Tua this week. Carson Wentz going up against the New York Jets on Thursday Night Football. This matchup isn't exactly what we want in a streaming quarterback, but the options are limited this week. If you need to stream and you're looking for guys that are low owned, there's not a whole lot of them with decent matchups. And then Mac Jones going up against Carolina, 14% owned. He's not going to win you your week by any means, but he's not going to lose your week either. Definitely looking like one of the better options so far out of this rookie class. Mac Jones has looked very, very solid this season. Now moving on over to defense and special teams. Dallas at 50% owned. They're going to get Denver. They played well in Minnesota on Sunday night. They're starting to get a little bit more healthy. Yeah, they could give up a lot of points to Denver, but I also could see some sacks and some turnovers, which could help offset that as well. For Chicago going up against Pittsburgh, the pass rush is going to get after Ben Roethlisberger. Chicago could give up a ton of yards, but they're going to get some sacks. I would expect some turnovers in this game as well from Pittsburgh, and that's going to help boost those points. And then for Miami, again, like I just mentioned with Tua, they're going to be going up against Houston. Normally, I wouldn't even consider Miami, but again, it's Houston. You could potentially use Miami if you really absolutely had to, but I would look to Dallas and Chicago first if I were you. A few players to drop. I just want to address this again with Calvin Ridley in the players to drop section. We don't know when he's going to be back. He said he's just stepping away. Could be for a couple of weeks. Could be for a month. Could end up being for the whole season. We don't know. He didn't say. You got to hold him. Now, is he going to be eligible to go in your IR spot? I don't know. That's going to be up to your individual platforms. If he's listed as out, then you should be able to put him on IR, but he might not be listed as out until later in the week, so you might have to be switching him back and forth. With that being said, I'm not dropping Calvin Ridley, especially if it's keeper league, especially if it's a dynasty league. You're not going to be able to trade him for anything right now, so just hold on to him for the time being, and let's see what happens. Could be back in a few weeks after he takes this break, does what he needs to do to get in the right mindset, gets feeling better, then he decides to end up giving it another shot and comes back. It could be, again, in a few weeks. It could be in a month. It could be not until next season. I don't know, but we're just going to have to keep an eye on it. Don't drop him yet. Tyler Higbee, we're going to be dropping him. Great matchup this past week and couldn't do anything. It really is the wide receivers and running backs there right now. Even Van Jefferson's getting a lot more looks than what Tyler Higbee is. Tyler Higbee, kind of moving off him now. Odell Beckham Jr. continues to do nothing, and I don't know if it's Baker. I don't know if it's the game plan. I just don't know. But, Cleveland, Kevin Stefanski, you're letting me down a little bit, my man. Big supporter of you guys, all right? The offense doesn't look good right now. Who's to blame? I don't know. I think it's a little bit of everybody. Robbie Anderson from Carolina, he continues to do nothing. I think we're done with him finally. Hopefully, I listed him here last week. Laviska Shenault, it's clear that they're not utilizing him. I'm done with him now, too. He's still over 60% owned. David Johnson from Houston. I'm moving on from David Johnson. I know I mentioned it last week, but they're not giving him the touches. They're going with Phillip Lindsay. They're going, obviously, with Rex Burkhead. They gave another guy more touches this past week. I'm just not feeling any David Johnson right now. It just doesn't look like they want. And for those of you that are trying to stash Deshaun Watson, just stop. Get him off your roster. The guy's not going to play this season. It's not happening. Just drop Deshaun Watson. Let's move on from it, and we'll look ahead to 2022 with him. But there you go, ladies and gentlemen, my waiver wire video for week 9. Hopefully y'all appreciated the content, and if you did, you got to hit that like button down below for me. Let me know in the comments, who are you rushing to add this week on the waiver wire? And of course, if you're new here, you got to hit that subscribe button and stick around. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great rest of your day, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
You know we about that job life, stuck in a rut, and you need some motivation. Head to the channel for this Headliner Nation.